I stared at the acceptance letter from my dream university, my heart racing with a mixture of pride and relief. The hospital break room's harsh fluorescent lights illuminated the scholarship details. It felt like the universe was finally acknowledging all my hard work. As an nurse, I'd spent countless nights juggling shifts while studying, building up my savings for college. Every extra shift, every exhausting night at the emergency room had been worth it. My savings account had been steadily growing, carefully managed through my mother's account since I was too young for my own when I started. Every paycheck from the hospital, every holiday bonus went straight there. I'd trusted her completely with my money. After all, she was my mother. I'd always assumed she'd transfer it back once I headed off to college. It was my money, earned during long nights in the dealing with everything from car accidents to heart attacks. Marie, great work with that trauma case earlier, Dr. Chen called out as she grabbed her coffee, pulling me from my thoughts. I smiled, tucking the acceptance letter back into my scrubs pocket. The emergency room had taught me responsibility, the value of quick thinking, and most importantly, the significance of being reliable. These lessons had helped me secure this scholarship, and I was proud of that. Little did I know that my careful planning was about to be derailed by my family's twisted priorities, particularly when it came to my sister Sarah, the former model who'd never quite grasped the concept of responsibility. Family meeting at the Anderson house. My parents called me for a talk one evening after my hospital shift. I still had my scrubs on, the faint smell of antiseptic clinging to my clothes when they dropped their bombshell. With an almost casual air, they explained that since I'd been lucky enough to get a scholarship, they had decided to redirect my savings, my hard-earned money from years of her shifts, to my older sister Sarah's future instead. I sat there in stunned silence, my work ID badge still hanging around my neck, as they casually discussed giving away money I'd earned treating patients during countless night shifts and holidays. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I was saving lives in the they were planning to hand over my savings to my perpetually irresponsible sister. To understand this better, let me tell you about my sister Sarah. While I was working weekend shifts at the hospital, learning about patient care and responsibility, Sarah was living in a completely different world. She'd been scouted as a model in her teens, and that early taste of glamour had shaped her entire worldview. Her Instagram followers meant more to her than real achievements, and her sense of reality had become increasingly warped over the years. Despite being 3 years older than me, Sarah had never held down a real job. Her modeling career had fizzled out after she dropped out of her fashion school, but she still acted like she was on the verge of her big break. Our parents, especially Mom, enabled this fantasy. They treated her like she was still that promising young model, destined for magazine covers, even though she now spent most of her time staging elaborate photo shoots for her social media while living off our parents' support. From childhood, the pattern was clear. Sarah could do no wrong in their eyes. While I was expected to maintain perfect grades alongside my hospital volunteering, Sarah's mistakes were always brushed aside. Mom would inevitably jump to her defense, insisting her precious model daughter could never be at fault. Even when presented with clear evidence of Sarah's mistakes, Mom would somehow twist the narrative to make Sarah the victim. Flashback to Sarah's school incident. One incident from our teenage years stands out particularly clearly. When Sarah was 14, at the height of her early modeling career, she was caught bullying younger girls at school. It wasn't just petty teasing. The school administration called our parents in for an emergency meeting. Multiple students and teachers had witnessed her behavior, and there was clear evidence of systematic harassment. I remember sitting at the nurse's station after my volunteer shift when Mom called to tell me about the meeting. She was livid, but not at Sarah, at the school. During the meeting, Sarah, with her model perfect tears streaming down her face, denied everything. Mom, rather than considering the possibility that her daughter might actually be in the wrong, latched onto those tears like they were proof of innocence. "Those jealous girls are just trying to ruin your modeling career," Mom had said, loud enough for the whole administrative office to hear. She fought with the teachers, argued with the principal, and even accused the victims of conspiring against Sarah because of her budding fame. The whole time, I could see Sarah's tears disappearing when Mom wasn't looking, replaced by a smug smile. 2 years later, things escalated when Sarah turned 16. By then, my weekends were filled with shifts, learning to handle real emergencies, while Sarah was creating different kinds of emergencies. She was caught not just smoking at school, but trying to sell drugs. The evidence was undeniable this time. Security footage, witnesses, everything. Even Mom couldn't talk her way out of this one. The school had no choice but to expel her. But instead of letting Sarah face the consequences, Mom went into full damage control mode. She couldn't bear to have anything tarnish the image of her perfect model daughter. Rather than addressing the reality of Sarah's actions, she crafted an entirely different narrative for our relatives and neighbors. "We're sending Sarah to an exclusive private school," she'd tell anyone who would listen, her voice dripping with false pride. "They have better connections to the modeling industry." I'd hear her on the phone during my breaks at the hospital, spinning this fantasy while I dealt with actual overdose cases in the seeing firsthand what drugs could do to people. The reality? No local school would accept Sarah after the drug incident. The expensive private school wasn't a choice. It was our parents' desperate attempt to hide their golden child's fall from grace. The financial strain was enormous, but they were willing to bear it to maintain the facade of Sarah's perfect life. Sarah's escalating problems. But Sarah's time at the expensive private school didn't last long. One night, while I was working a particularly busy shift in the my parents received a call that Sarah had vanished. She'd left behind one of her dramatically staged letters, the kind she probably thought would look good on her social media, declaring her undying love for her boyfriend, Tom, a former hedge fund trader she'd met at some influencer party. I remember getting the news during my break, still wearing blood-stained scrubs from treating a car accident victim. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I was quite literally trying to save lives, my family was in chaos over Sarah's latest bid for attention. My parents launched into their usual panic mode, calling everyone they knew, filing police reports, the works. The police found her a few days later at a friend's house, staging elaborate photo shoots for her social media as if nothing was wrong. When we went to get her, Sarah, ever the performer, turned it into a dramatic scene worthy of her wannabe influencer status. She declared that Tom was her soulmate, and she had to follow her heart, phrases that sounded like they were pulled straight from her Instagram captions. Instead of putting their foot down, my parents, especially Mom, gave in yet again. They struck a deal. Sarah would finish high school, and then they would support her marriage to Tom. I watched this unfold from the sidelines, between my hospital shifts and college prep, wondering how they could keep enabling her behavior. The wedding and aftermath. True to form, the moment Sarah graduated, she and Tom had a wedding that looked perfect on Instagram, but was financially devastating for our parents. They helped the newlyweds find an apartment, paid their rent, and basically funded their entire lifestyle. Tom, who'd lost his trading job due to some vague misunderstanding, couldn't hold down a steady position, but that didn't stop them from living like social media celebrities. While I was saving every penny from my nursing job for college, my parents were pouring money into supporting Sarah and Tom's fantasy lifestyle. The contrast was stark. I spent my days dealing with life and death situations in the while they were focused on maintaining Sarah's image as a successful ex-model turned lifestyle influencer. Current situation. Marie's college life. When my parents decided to take my hospital savings, money I'd earned treating patients during countless night shifts, and give it to Sarah for a new apartment, something inside me finally snapped. I confronted them in their living room, still wearing my scrubs from an exhausting 12-hour shift. I demanded to know why they were taking money I'd earned saving lives to enable Sarah's latest social media perfect life chapter. That's when they revealed the real reason. Sarah was pregnant. Dad's face lit up as he announced his impending grandfather status, while Mom was already planning Instagram-worthy baby shower themes. They were completely unfazed by my reaction, by the fact that they were stealing my college fund. Their focus was entirely on how this baby would look on Sarah's social media feed. Sarah and Tom need a proper home for the baby, Mom explained, scrolling through luxury apartment listings. And since you got that scholarship, you don't need this money anymore. The casual way she dismissed years of my hard work in the was breathtaking. They were planning to use my savings to buy an apartment where Sarah could stage her perfect motherhood influencer photo shoots. The reality of their priorities hit me like a coding patient's flatline, sudden and harsh. After years of working emergency shifts, maintaining perfect grades, and finally earning a scholarship to nursing school, I still came second to Sarah's carefully curated social media life. My real-world achievements meant nothing compared to her follower count. Marie's college move. When it came time to move to college, my dad didn't even offer to help. He was too busy helping Sarah stage the perfect nesting photos for her pregnancy announcement post. My fellow nurses from the people who had watched me grow from a volunteer to a certified nurse, helped me move into my dorm instead. They understood the value of hard work and real accomplishment, something my family had never seemed to grasp. The moment I settled into my dorm room, surrounded by my medical textbooks instead of ring lights and selfie sticks, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time, I was free from the constant comparison to Sarah's artificial perfect life. I could focus on my studies and my path toward becoming an emergency room nurse practitioner without having to watch my parents fund another of Sarah's social media ventures. 2 years later, emergency call. The last 2 years had been wonderfully quiet. I'd immersed myself in my nursing studies while continuing to work part-time in the university hospital's Between handling trauma cases and acing my advanced medical courses, I'd barely thought about my family's social media circus. Sarah and I had minimal contact. I'd only met my nephew Lucas once, during a brief visit that seemed more focused on getting the perfect aunt and baby shot for her Instagram than actual family bonding. My parents rarely checked on me unless they needed something, which made the early morning call from my mom even more surprising. I was just finishing a night shift at the when my phone lit up. Mom's voice was shaking, lacking its usual polished social media mom tone. "Has your sister contacted you?" she asked, her voice cracking. When I said no, she broke down completely, a far cry from her usual carefully curated composure. Between sobs, she revealed that something terrible had happened that morning. They'd woken up to frantic doorbell ringing and pounding on their front door. When they rushed downstairs, they found Lucas, now 2 years old, standing alone on the porch with his little backpack and a note. "No Sarah, no Tom, just my nephew, abandoned like a delivery package." The truth emerges. "What did the note say?" I asked, my nurse's training kicking in as I tried to stay calm and assess the situation. That's when Mom revealed the full truth, one that wouldn't be making it to Sarah's Instagram feed. The note was brutally honest. Sarah had written that she couldn't handle the mommy blogger pressure anymore and was leaving Lucas for me to raise. She claimed she wanted him to have a responsible caregiver like me, rather than an Instagram mother like she'd tried to be. My father suddenly took the phone, his voice carrying the weight of fear I'd heard so many times from parents in the waiting room. He explained that both Sarah and Tom's phones were off, and a week ago they'd asked for money they'd likely use to fund their escape. "You need to come home right away," Dad insisted. We need to find your sister. Standing in the hospital locker room, still in my scrubs after a 12-hour shift, I felt an all too familiar weariness settle over me. I have finals this week, I explained calmly, the way I would to an agitated patient's family. I can't just drop everything. This is family, Dad argued, his voice rising. Your sister needs you. No, I corrected him, years of her experience helping me maintain my composure. Lucas needs responsible adults who will put his needs first. When was the last time either of you actually checked on my life, my studies, my career? The confrontation. My father's voice took on that guilt-inducing tone I'd heard so many times in the from family members trying to pressure exhausted medical staff. You're being too harsh. This isn't about old family issues. This is about coming together in a crisis. Working in emergency medicine had taught me about real crises, life and death situations that required clear thinking and decisive action. This situation, while serious, needed the same approach. I couldn't let emotional manipulation cloud my professional judgment. 1 week later, family house. After finishing my finals, I made the decision to visit. The scene I found was exactly what my medical training had prepared me to expect. My mother's eyes were puffy from crying, her usual perfectly curated appearance nowhere to be seen. Dad looked haunted, the way families in the waiting room often did. Lucas, however, seemed surprisingly well adjusted, playing contentedly with toys scattered across what used to be my room, now converted into an Instagram-worthy nursery. I brought Lucas a small gift, not for the social media moment, but because as an nurse, I'd learned how small gestures could comfort children in traumatic situations. While playing with him, I noticed concerning signs that my medical training couldn't ignore, subtle indicators of neglect that wouldn't be visible in Sarah's perfectly filtered Instagram posts. The reality check. I need to see the note, I said firmly, using my professional voice. The one I used when dealing with difficult situations in the My parents exchanged nervous glances before reluctantly producing it. As I read, the true extent of the situation became clear. Far worse than what they'd admitted over the phone. Sarah's note wasn't just about abandoning her son. It was a confession of how she and Tom had spiraled into drug use, hiding their addiction behind perfectly staged social media posts. The apartment my parents had bought with my college fund had become a facade, concealing parties and substance abuse, while Sarah maintained her perfect mommy blogger image online. The note revealed a pattern of leaving Lucas alone while they chased their highs, using my parents' financial support to fuel their addiction rather than care for their child. Sarah had written that she wanted Lucas to have the stability she saw in my life, the real achievements and responsibility she'd always avoided. The hard truth. My parents finally broke down and shared the whole story. Behind Sarah's carefully curated social media presence, she and Tom had been in a downward spiral. Despite my parents' attempts to get them help, including rehab programs, they'd always relapsed, prioritizing their online image over actual recovery. The crisis point came when my parents threatened to report them to Child Protective Services after finding Lucas alone in the apartment once too often. Sarah's response was to take one last chunk of money and disappear, leaving her son behind with a note asking me, the sister she'd barely spoken to in years, to raise him. The parents' request. As my father continued explaining, his demeanor shifted from defeated to hopeful, in a way I'd seen countless times in the family members grasping at any possible solution. Your mother and I have been thinking, he started, in that careful tone that immediately set off my professional alarm bells. We're not as young as we used to be, and while we love having Lucas here, we can't handle full-time childcare. Then came their suggestion, delivered with the same casual disregard they'd shown when taking my college savings. They thought it would be perfect if I could move back home and take over Lucas's care. My mother nodded enthusiastically. adding that I could put my nursing studies on hold since Sarah specifically wanted you to raise him. I couldn't help but laugh. The kind of incredulous laugh I sometimes had to suppress during particularly absurd moments in the ER. You want me to drop out of nursing school to raise the child my sister abandoned? The irony was almost too much. They were once again asking me to sacrifice my future for Sarah's mistakes. The final stand. Drawing on years of experience delivering difficult news to patients' families, I calmly explained that we needed to contact Child Protective Services. This wasn't about family pride anymore. It was about Lucas's welfare. My parents could petition for legal custody, or Protective Services could help find the best solution for Lucas's care. My father immediately protested, insisting this was a family matter that didn't need outside intervention. My mother joined in, claiming Sarah would be disappointed in me for not stepping up when she'd specifically chosen me as Lucas's guardian. I'm not concerned about disappointing Sarah, I stated firmly, using the same steady voice I used when explaining hard medical truths to patients. I'm concerned about doing what's right for Lucas and maintaining the professional career I've worked so hard to build, the career that actually helps people. After hours of discussion, my parents finally agreed to give me time to think, though I could tell they were hoping I'd eventually give in to their demands. 2 months later, the situation has evolved significantly. My nurse's training and documentation proved invaluable. Sarah's note, which I verified was genuinely in her handwriting, became crucial evidence. The bank statements my parents showed me revealed the staggering amount of money they'd been sending Sarah and Tom monthly, while their apartment, which I visited with my parents, told the real story behind the perfect Instagram posts. The place reeked of neglect, empty bottles scattered everywhere, cabinets stripped bare, and a pervasive odor that reminded me of some of the worst cases I'd seen in the ER. My medical training helped me catalog the signs of substance abuse and child neglect that would be relevant to CPS. I contacted Child Protective Services, providing them with a detailed report that combined my professional medical observations with the family history. For now, my parents have temporary custody of Lucas, an arrangement that seems to be working. Yes, they tried to guilt me into taking him, but as an ER nurse, I've learned that emotional manipulation can't override professional judgment and ethical responsibility. Resolve. I've maintained my boundaries, explaining to my parents that I cannot and will not let my sister's poor life choices derail my nursing career. Working in the ER has taught me that enabling destructive behavior never leads to positive outcomes. I pointed out that they were facing the consequences of their own long-term enabling of Sarah's behavior. My parents still haven't apologized for taking my hospital savings, but they've started expressing regret about buying that apartment for Sarah. The property deed is in their name, and they're now planning to rent it out, finally making a practical financial decision instead of funding Sarah's social media fantasies. Current situation. I'm back at university now, focused on my advanced nursing studies. I make time to visit Lucas when I can, bringing him small gifts and spending quality time with him, not for social media posts, but for genuine connection. He's adjusting well to life with my parents, still believing his mother and father are on vacation. The difference now is that my visits are on my terms, guided by my professional understanding of child development and trauma. As an ER nurse, I've seen too many cases of family crisis to let emotional manipulation override sound judgment. The skills I've learned in handling trauma cases have proven invaluable in maintaining healthy boundaries while ensuring Lucas gets the support he needs. When I look at Lucas playing in what used to be my room, I'm reminded of all the young patients I've treated in the ER, innocent children affected by adult decisions. But I also know that sometimes the best care we can provide isn't always what family members initially demand. Sometimes it means making tough decisions and standing firm in what we know is right.